weekend long, or all week long, I should say, keeping us awake. Will be keeping us awake in San Francisco all weekend long. The first place Orioles. We've been monitoring all that. Of course, Luke and I will be tweeting about that and social mediaing about that into the night. But meantime, it is football season here. We got Hall of Fame games canceled, and the Ravens playing on Thursday night. And I'm Facebook friends with this guy. He's one of my favorite people that I've ever met in the NFL through the 21, 22 years now. The Ravens have been back here in Baltimore. He didn't spend enough time here for my money. Ran off to become the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers. He has moved around from Denver and Atlanta and San Diego and parts elsewhere. He is now in Denver, Colorado, where he's doing Sirius Radio, and that's Sirius, S-U-R-I-U-S. He is head coach Mike Nolan, our former defensive coordinator here, and we welcome him back to Baltimore. Mike, open arms, man. This must be weird for you. It's August and you're not in a camp. What the heck's going on, man?
Yeah, well, thanks, Nestor. It is a little different, no question, but I am enjoying it, enjoying the radio. I had a chance to do some TV, and hopefully that materializes to be a little bit more during the season. But I'm just relaxing, like you said. We're in Denver, my wife and I, and the kids are all out of the house. We're empty nesters, and just, like I said, you're taking it a day at a time, but we're enjoying it.
Well, man, you had a radio show with me here back when you were the defensive coordinator. You called in every Monday, and so did Rex. We're at a different era, right? A decade and a half later, there is no defensive or offensive coordinator anywhere in the NFL that is allowed or thinks to go on the radio for 30 minutes and talk about yesterday's game, right?
Well, you know what? That's interesting to say that. I did not know that it was kind of universal across the league, because I remember being at Baltimore. One of the great things I really enjoyed about Baltimore was the organization, would really try to promote its own people. And so if you had an opportunity to do, as you say, radio or even TV at that time, they were very helpful and tried to make it happen as often as we could. So I'm kind of surprised to hear that. I knew that they were one of the only teams back then, but the fact that they're not doing it any longer kind of surprises me, because, like I said, that's one of the was really one of the great beauties about being an assistant there is how much they did for their people.
Well, John's a little different than Brian. You know what I mean? Like, I guess you've worked for how many head coaches, right? A dozen probably over the course of time, and you've been one yourself, and you know the pressures of the job and how it's gotten ramped up and amped up, and to some degree, it must be nice to have a little breath of fresh air here and take a break. How many consecutive years? 30 years for you? How many years did you coach in the NFL?
In the NFL, 29.
20. I was off by one. All right,
Yeah, you were off by one, but consecutive years. So you're right. I mean, ever since I was a high school player, which was 40 years ago. That was when I got out of high school. Anyhow, there hasn't been an August where I wasn't playing football or coaching football. So that has been quite some time. But at least I stay involved like I am. I'm talking about it. Let's put it that way.
Well, in talking about it, and I know you're doing this on Sirius XM and, doing the NFL channel and sort of bouncing around as a sort of a fill-in float guy. You're talking with different people in different ways. The thought of being outside of the bubble of being in it, just from a conversational perspective, must be really difficult for you, for Ray Lewis, after playing 16, 17 years in the league, that when you take the mic and you're away from it and you're not working for anyone other than your name and your reputation and what you don't have to protect anybody in any sort of way. This is going to be a different kind of thing for you, especially on game nights when mistakes are made and criticisms are brought forth, right?
That's true. The difference is, I'll say this first of all, it is energizing. It's fun, even though you're not coaching or playing and doing those types of things. It is energizing to talk about it and in depth, because obviously everyone has their opinions. Well, so do coaches of other teams and what they've done, whether it's a player or coach, but you have opinions. And so naturally on the radio, you get a chance to give your opinions. And like I said, it's kind of an adrenaline rush at times, because obviously everyone wants to be right in their opinion. And if you are, that's great. But if you're not, you live and learn and you move on. But outside of that, the thing that's kind of, I guess the biggest difference is that, as you already said, if you're, when you're a coach or a player, you typically are staying in a protective mode all the time. You make sure that you try to stay within the framework of what the message is within the team, and so you don't go outside that message. And then you also try to protect your teammates and the players that are on your squad if you're the head coach, because again, you're not trying to get people in trouble on the air. Whereas when you're in this role, it really doesn't matter. Matter of fact, people want to hear you get people in trouble.
Well, I don't even know that it's that. I just think there's an honest part of all of the evaluation that really is heartfelt when it comes from a coach, right? And, I would be the guy to criticize Gruden to say he's not critical enough. He praises too much. Therefore, I don't believe much of it. You know what I mean? Like that balance between praise and criticism that, quite frankly, I've had very little trouble with football players over 21 years because you guys go in there and chew their ass in the film room immediately, right? I mean, there's nothing left undone between you being a defensive coordinator or a coach and a $6 or an $8 million football player that's not getting the job done on Sunday. And as Jaworski would say, the eye in the sky doesn't lie. Football players, they get it. They get their feelings hurt a lot behind closed doors, right?
Yeah, I would say that one of the differences that you just pointed out is you're definitely much more direct with your players and your coaches when you're within the confines of your organization. You try not to, you're not really, you try to hide nothing. I mean, you want it out there because you want guys to get better. Whereas when you're talking about those same things in public that you talked about with your coaches and your players, you're more of in a protective mode because you want to motivate your people. You're not trying to take them to the ground. And within the walls, it's a lot easier to motivate them and be direct and be perfectly honest. When you're perfectly honest on the outside, I hate to say it sometimes, but that's not anybody else's business because it's going to be short-term anyway. So the last thing you want to do is have something grow into a big problem when all it was a correction that had to do with a technique or a game. But sometimes if that goes public, it becomes a big deal. And then every week they're saying, boy, did he correct that yet? Did he correct that yet? As opposed to, yes, he did or no, he did. It's nobody else's business. We're just trying to win football games. So you're just in more of a protective mode when you're when your role is as coach or player.
He is Mike Nolan, longtime NFL coach, 29 years, including a couple here in Baltimore back at the turn of the century, I like to say. And, of course, is the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers. He's taking a year off talking on Sirius XM, and we are delighted to have Coach Nolan back on. All right, so let's get into the Ravens here. First and foremost, obviously begins with Joe Flacco, and assuming the health is there, and he certainly has looked good through the first week and a half of camp and getting ready for the year. So many question marks on a 5-11 team. I know you know how Ozzie works. I know you know how John Harbaugh works. I know you would have confidence in a Joe Flacco and would love to have a Joe Flacco, a caliber quarterback in any organization. But the rest of this really is, and it's a very transitional year for the Ravens, and there are going to be a lot of question marks until these guys actually go out on the field and produce.
Yeah, the Ravens are one of the very top organizations in the NFL. We all know that. I know that you say it right there to your home crowd all the time, but, a lot of times they don't really know because they're not really in tune with what exactly is going on at the other teams. Well, believe me and trust me, like I said, the Ravens are one of the very top organizations, starting with the ownership all the way down to the very bottom. They do just such a great job. Ozzie does a great job with personnel. Dick Cass does an outstanding job. Kevin Byrne with PR does great. I mean, everyone in that organization, and in particular at the very top, is very stout in their job. And as you said, they are kind of as the outside looking in goes, they're very much in a transition. It looks like to us now, as you just stated. Joe Flacco is a huge part of them getting back on track because obviously he got injured last year and that hurt their chances. But even with that being said, the turnover in both coaches, with Kubiak and Dennison leaving, as well as players that have retired, injuries that they faced a year ago, and some of those players, as we know, that they lost were great leaders, whether it was Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, or even the running back that got in trouble. I mean, all those people, those are great losses, and those are the type of people that Baltimore has always had several of them on their squad, and now all of a sudden it's everyone kind of looking around like, who's going to take the reins? But, you have to be built for that job. As far as being a player, it just doesn't get set on your shoulders and then you say, okay, I'm going to run with it and be good at it. All those guys I just mentioned that were leaders, I mean, those are natural leaders that were a huge part of all the successes they've had there for, 20 years or however long, nearly 20 years anyhow.
Well, and the Ravens have been so good at bringing in veteran guys. I mean, whether back in your era it was a Shannon Sharpe or Rod Woodson, who, everybody in the league thought Rod Woodson was shot and had nothing left. And Marvin said, hey, he's going to play safety, be a Pro Bowl safety. And brought him in, and he went on and played in Oakland even longer. The situation here, though, where you look at the Matt Burks, you look at even Anquan Bolden. I know that was a trade, but the secondary guys who have played somewhere else when they come to Baltimore, Trevor Price, those guys all fall in love with Baltimore. And Eric Weddle is sort of the next man up, as well as Ben Watson and Mike Wallace. But Weddle specifically because you were with him last year, he has been, he hadn't even stood on the field yet. In 10 days, just practice, you can see what kind of a dude this guy is.
Yeah, and you left out, as you well know, Elvis Dumerville is another guy they brought in from the outside that's got good leadership abilities, but a hell of a player. And they've always done a good job in that area. And you mentioned Eric Weddle. Yes, I was with him last year at San Diego, and he is your consummate pro. He is the first guy in, last guy to leave. He's all football. He's extremely intelligent. I'm telling you, I've been fortunate to coach a number of players that were just great football players, but along with that, just knew the game, whether it was a Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and a number of other players. But anyway, Eric Weddle is one of those guys. He knows the game as well as anyone out there. I know that he knew the San Diego playbook front and back. He just knew it better than anybody. So I know what type of guy he is, both mentally and physically, and he was a great catch for the Baltimore Ravens in the offseason. It was I was really happy that that's where he went to, just because of what I know about Eric, my respect for Eric, and also for the Raven organization.
Give me a couple teams you're watching here in transition this year. There's been a lot of heat on Tampa, on Jacksonville. I'm talking about bad teams that can become good, perennial 4, 5, 6 win teams that this year you might look up at Thanksgiving and say, they're 7-5. They might make the playoffs. I think Jack out in Oakland certainly has an opportunity to really turn the corner this year with them.
Yeah, I think he does. I would say that the team that comes to mind first was Oakland Raiders. They were the first one. The second team that comes to mind would be Jacksonville. Right now, they're the paper Tigers. They've got a lot of good players on paper. They just need to put it all together and play as a unit. But the difference between them and Oakland is Oakland's got a year under their belt of showing improvement, both on the field and continuing again in free agency in the draft of adding good players. So they're getting better on the field and off the field, and it shows. Jacksonville, on the other hand, has continued to build up what's on paper, but they've yet to put it all together on the field. So this year for them, this is a real challenging year for them, and they've got to produce, or the next guy is going to be the guy that's going to be able to take advantage of all those players they've accumulated. Those two teams in particular, the ones that come to mind the quickest. You mentioned it also. I think Tampa Bay's got a chance because of the coaching change. They needed that. I think they're a better football team right now. They'll be better coached. They still are probably some players away. They're not near as talented as the two teams we just talked about, Oakland and Jacksonville. But I think the coaching is going to give them a boost. They're going to surprise some people. They may be the second team in that division. Outside of that, I think most of the other teams, you're going to get what you expect. I think Arizona and Seattle will take that division. I don't think the other two teams will. San Francisco and L.A. are ready. They're all in transition. I think the same thing. Green Bay and Minnesota are strong, so I don't think the other two teams in that division, Detroit and Chicago, do much. So outside of the teams we just mentioned, the Oakland and Jacksonville and maybe Tampa Bay, I think the other teams are pretty set, in my opinion, just looking at it anyhow going into the season.
I can't think of anything weirder except a game you were involved in, as well as Coach Billick, who we have on Tuesday night out at Greenmount Station, having some crab cakes with us up in Carroll County. Invite everybody up to get swabbed for the Bone Marrow Registry. Head Coach Mike Nolan joining us here. You were a part of the Philadelphia seam issue many years ago, and now the NFL on their own field in a complex that they've spent about $1 billion upgrading on their Hall of Fame weekend had to cancel the game on Sunday night. It's kind of inconceivable, isn't it, Coach?
Yeah, that's a little nutty. I thought it was nutty when it happened to us in Philadelphia. It was like, my goodness, who is in charge of the field? You always have somebody as a backup. Usually you have somebody down the food chain that kind of comes to the head guy and says, hey, look, are you aware that the field's this bad or something's not right? It's kind of unusual that happens. And here it happens again at the Hall of Fame game. Now, I saw something said as well that they would possibly, make this game up later. I can't see that in a million years. You're not going to make up this game is an extra bonus game anyway, being played for the sake of the Hall of Fame. So therefore, if you don't take advantage of this weekend, I don't see it being replayed. When are you going to do it? Nobody wants to put their players in jeopardy later on in training camp just for the sake of completing a preseason schedule. I know back when it was the Philly game, we did not. When Baltimore played Philly, we just dropped the game and here we go.
Well, I know also, I remember an afternoon we went out to Green Bay and we had to chase Brett Favre around. I still say the day in Green Bay, we had Randall Cunningham. I've never seen a quarterback have a better day than Brett Favre had that day. I mean, he single-handedly beat the Ravens. And we didn't see him a whole lot through all the years. You know, we saw him in Minnesota once, a couple times to Green Bay coming through here in a preseason game and whatnot. But I know you had to lace it up and try to beat him over the course of time. It was a hell of a weekend for inductees, but Favre's speech was special and memorable and long as well, curiously long.
Yeah, it was. But, what I thought was interesting about his speech was I'm always listening to, obviously, who they thank, who they do not thank, things like that. And it was curious to me that he left out a couple current players that are still at Green Bay and management people that I was surprised. I thought he would have been mentioned everyone intact, but he did talk about the things he wanted to. I thought it was a good I thought he did a good job, as I thought all of them did an excellent job. It was very enjoyable. I hope everyone else enjoyed it as much as I did. But I thought all the speakers, all the selected guys did a great job.
Well, we're 2 years out on Ray Lewis. Everybody here is gassing up their purple vans and pointing them west. I was taking emails all week and people saying, hey, you're running a road trip to Canton in 2 years? I'm like, it's 2 years from now. Yeah, I guess I am, but let's get him into the Hall of Fame first. But it is a great, great weekend, and I know it's been marred by the game not being played that no one was going to watch anyway. But all that being said, it's expanding, it's growing, and it's becoming more of an event. And as more iconic and a kind of classic players wind up on the podium, I think that weekend is trending up in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate that the game wasn't played, because it's an opportunity for them to continue to talk about the Hall of Famers, the inductees, and all the things that go with the NFL. It's an extremely positive event, and so it's unfortunate that it wasn't played.
Yeah. Coach, great having you on, man. Great hearing you on the radio. Great following along on social media every time you're on Sirius. I get a little notification about that as well, and I like seeing you on Facebook as well. And love to the family. Enjoy yourself out in Denver, and we'll try to catch up with you from time to time. It was great to have you on.
Thank you, Nestor. I look forward to it. Yeah, give me a shout anytime. I'd love to talk to Baltimore people. That's one of my favorite places of all time.
You know what? Later on, when there's actual games and strategy and questions I have, I'm going to go to you. You be the czar of my telestrator around here, okay?
Yeah, I would be happy to.
There he is, Mike Nolan, longtime NFL coach, 29 years, including several here in Baltimore that we enjoyed immensely. One of my favorite people in football, Mike Nolan now, sitting the season out and hanging out on Sirius XM and probably talking with us a couple times during the season, too. We do appreciate that. Don't forget, Brian Billick will be with us on Tuesday night at Greenmount Station in Hampstead. We'll be eating some crab cakes, knocking back some beverages, and talking some football as well. I'm sure we're going to talk some Denny Green as well as Seamgate on the Paint Gate on Sunday night out in Canton, Ohio. I'm Nestor. This is WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Taos in Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports. My wife